Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for taking the time to join me today. My name is Melanie Lambert. I'm excited to be with you here today for this session, Navigating a Federal Funding Freeze. I am just looking forward to sharing the content that we have here for you today. At Just Right Grants, we specialize in helping nonprofits not only secure grant funding, but also build sustainable, diversified fundraising strategies that support long-term success. So before we begin, I wanted to take a few minutes to share some housekeeping items with you because we do have a lot of content today. This webinar is going to last about an hour, might be a little bit longer than that, depending on how slow or fast I talk. But I'm going to save some time at the end for live Q&A. If we are running over time and I don't get a chance to answer your question live on the webinar today, do know that I will get back to you via email and we can continue the conversation at that point. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat box throughout the session and I'll address them at the end. And then we'll be sending out a recording of today's session along with any of the downloads that we share tomorrow. So keep an eye on your inbox. So don't feel like you're going to miss anything if you need to step away for a few minutes. As people continue to join us here in the first few minutes, one of my favorite parts about hosting a webinar is to find out where you're watching today's session from. So if you could use the chat function and just drop in there where you're joining from. I am in the metro Atlanta area in the beautiful city of Cartersville, Georgia. So I would love to see where you're from. Pop on over here to the chat. Anybody want to share this morning? Oh, Rome, Georgia. That's my neighbor. Snowy Providence, Rhode Island. Oh, I'm envious. A real winter. We had a little bit of snow here. You live in Cartersville. Wonderful. We had a little bit of snow here this year, not as much as my family that's a little bit further south than us, but I'm sure my definition of snow, Claudia, is a little bit different than yours. Ours was about 1.5 inches that was mostly just slush. Tampa and Denver, New Mexico. Hi, Jane. Denver, again, I'm sure your snow is different than mine there. Thank you, everybody. I just think it's fun to see where everybody is really close by in Cartersville and Rome, and then further away. And I just appreciate you being here so much. And everybody's got a lot on their plate right now in the fundraising and nonprofit world. So I appreciate it. So now that we've said hello, if you're still jumping on, feel free to continue to tell me where you're from. I always look back at them too as we wrap up the webinar, just out of curiosity. I think it's fun. I'm going to turn my camera off so that I can stay focused because, as I said, there's a lot of content today. And then we're going to jump right into our agenda. We know that federal grant funding pauses can create significant challenges for nonprofits, impacting everything from program operations to staffing and service delivery. But the good news is that there are practical steps that you can take right now to stabilize your organization, strengthen existing relationships, and explore new funding opportunities. That's exactly what we'll be covering in today's session. My goal is to give you actionable steps. So we'll talk about action items throughout the session that will help your nonprofit navigate this period of uncertainty or any future periods of uncertainty with confidence and clarity. Here's what we'll be diving into today. Assessing your financial position. We will work to understand your current funding landscape and identify your most urgent financial needs. Strengthening relationships with current funders. We'll go over strategies to keep your existing funding partners engaged and supportive. Diversifying your funding sources. We'll consider alternative revenue streams to help reduce reliance on federal grants. Exploring state, local, private, and corporate grant opportunities. These new funding sources can help bridge financial gaps. Communicating transparently with stakeholders. We'll talk about keeping your staff, board, donors and beneficiaries informed and engaged, and advocating for nonprofit support. We'll chat about using your collective voice to push for funding solutions at the state, local, and federal levels. By the end of this webinar, we'll walk away with clear next steps that you can implement right away to strengthen your organization's financial stability. I encourage you to take notes, ask questions in the chat, and engage with me throughout today's session. Let's get started. Before we dive in, I'd love to take a moment just to introduce myself. I am Melanie Lambert, Managing Director of Just Right Grants, where I specialize in helping nonprofits save time, spend less, and raise more. Over the years, I've had the privilege of working with organizations of all sizes, helping them move beyond reliance on a single funding source by building strong grant proposals, identifying new revenue opportunities, and creating long-term financial stability. At Just Right Grants, we offer nonprofits of all missions, budgets, and programs the opportunity to add grants to their fundraising strategy or enhance their existing efforts with our affordable subscription-based grant writing services. But our work goes beyond just writing grants. We help organizations think strategically about how to strengthen their overall fundraising mix so that they can be more resilient in the face of funding challenges. I understand firsthand how overwhelming fundraising can feel. Balancing grant deadlines, cultivating donor relationships, and exploring new revenue streams, all while staying focused on your mission. That's exactly why we've put together this webinar today, to give you practical tools and strategies to diversify your funding and create lasting financial stability for your organization. If you would like to learn more about Just Right Grants, or you want to chat with me about which cookbook we featured in our cookbook club meeting this month, that's my fun fact right there, feel free to reach out anytime. I'll share my contact information if you don't already have it at the end of the webinar. Now let's dive into our first critical step, assessing your financial position. When federal funding pauses, it's essential to have a clear understanding of where your organization stands financially. This process will help you make informed decisions on how to sustain operations and prioritize resources effectively. The first step is identifying which programs rely on federal funding and determining their level of risk. Start by listing all programs that receive federal funding. Categorize them based on how much they depend on these funds. Rank these programs by their importance to your mission. Some programs may be essential to your core mission, while others may be more flexible in their funding sources. Next, analyze which programs have the potential to continue operating with alternative funding. Are there existing donors, foundations, or corporate sponsors who may step in to support these programs? Consider program scalability. Are there ways to adjust service delivery to reduce costs without compromising impact? For example, could you shift to virtual services, reduce supply costs, or form partnerships to share resources? Once you've identified the programs most at risk, it's time to take a hard look at your financial reserves. Calculate the total amount of unrestricted funds available to sustain core operations. These funds are your safety net during times of financial uncertainty. Determine how long your reserves can sustain essential programs if no new funding comes in. Ask yourself, can we maintain operations for 3 months, 6 months, a year? Evaluate cash flow projections for the next 3 to 6 months. Understanding upcoming expenses and revenue will help anticipate potential shortfalls before they become critical. Look for cost-cutting measures. Are there non-essential expenses that can be temporarily reduced or eliminated? Can you renegotiate contracts with vendors for lower rates or extended payment terms? Having gathered all this financial data, the next step is to create a plan that ensures your nonprofit remains stable during a funding pause. Assign a financial team member to closely monitor cash flow on a weekly basis. Regular updates will help leadership stay informed and make proactive decisions. Establish spending priorities based on the severity of the funding pause and your organization's most critical needs. This ensures that the most vital programs remain operational. Develop a short-term budget that outlines necessary adjustments, including emergency funding sources that could provide immediate relief. This may include state and local grants, emergency donor appeals, or bridge loans. Assess your staffing situation. In the worst case scenario, would temporary staff reductions, furloughs, or role reallocations be necessary? If so, how can you implement these measures while minimizing disruption to your mission? So to wrap up this section, I encourage each of you to complete the financial assessment worksheet that I'm going to share with you right now. This tool will help you analyze your organization's current financial position, identify key areas where immediate action is needed, and develop a timeline for implementing strategic adjustments. Taking the time to conduct this assessment now will prepare your nonprofit to navigate funding uncertainties with confidence. Now we've assessed our financial position, it's time to focus on maintaining and sustaining our relationships with current funders. If federal grants are paused, other funding sources can step in to help bridge the gap. Proactively engaging your current funding partners can provide immediate relief and long-term sustainability. Let's discuss 3 strategies to do this effectively. First, keep donors updated. Transparency builds trust, and right now, trust is more important than ever. Funders and donors want to know that your organization is taking strategic steps to navigate a funding pause. Here's how you can keep them informed and engaged. I suggest you draft a donor update email. Clearly explain a federal funding pause and its potential impact on your programs. Highlight success stories to reinforce the importance of continued funding. Express gratitude for past support and emphasize how their contributions have made a difference. Beyond emails, another effective way to keep donors engaged is through direct communication. I recommend scheduling a donor Q&A session. Host a virtual meeting where donors can ask questions and hear directly from leadership. Use this as an opportunity to strengthen relationships and gain insights into donors' priorities. Offer specific ways they can help, such as increasing their giving, introducing new donors, or sharing your campaign. Additionally, you want to show your donors the tangible impact of their contribution. You can do this by sharing impact stories. Post on social media and your website about how donor contributions are sustaining key programs. Use compelling visuals, testimonials, and short videos to demonstrate your nonprofit's continued impact. Next, request bridge funding. Many foundations, corporate sponsors, and major donors are willing to provide emergency bridge funding during crises. Here's how to secure that funding. Start by identifying your top 10 funders. Review your funding sources and pinpoint donors most likely to contribute additional support. Prioritize funders with a history of flexible or emergency grants. Then develop a targeted bridge funding proposal. Clearly state the funding gap, how much is needed, and how the funds will be used. Outline the specific programs at risk and the consequences of inaction. Emphasize the urgency while offering solutions, such as matching campaigns, which we'll talk a little bit more about in a few minutes, and tiered funding options. After drafting a strong proposal, personal outreach is essential. Schedule phone calls or one-on-one meetings with major donors and foundation representatives. Be prepared with data and real-world examples of why their immediate support is crucial. Reinforce that their funding will help sustain critical services until federal funds resume. Matching campaigns can be an effective way to maximize contributions and incentivize donors. Here's how to launch one successfully. Partner with a corporate sponsor for a dollar matching campaign. Approach businesses that align with your mission and have a history of philanthropy. Propose a matching donation structure where the company agrees to match all individual gifts up to a certain amount. Once you have a matching sponsor, promoting that campaign is crucial. You should promote it aggressively. Use social media, email newsletters, and direct mail to spread the word. Set a clear deadline to create urgency and encourage immediate participation. Then encourage peer fundraising. Empower your board members, volunteers, and staff to reach out to their networks. Provide them with sample messaging and graphics to share on social media. So here's your action item. By the end of next week, draft and send an update email to your donors. If applicable, schedule one-on-one outreach to key funders and develop a matching gift strategy with at least one corporate sponsor. Strengthening your relationships with existing funders is one of the most strategic ways to sustain your nonprofit during uncertain times. Next, we'll dive into another critical approach, diversifying your funding sources. Now that we've discussed assessing your financial position and strengthening relationships with current funders, let's talk about an equally important step, diversifying your funding sources. A funding pause is a stark reminder of why diverse revenue streams are critical for your nonprofit's financial resilience. Relying solely on federal grants can leave your organization vulnerable when disruptions occur. By expanding your funding base, you can better sustain your mission and build long-term stability. Let's explore 3 key strategies for diversifying your funding sources. First, let's talk about individual giving campaigns. Engaging individual donors can provide immediate and flexible funding support. Many people in your community care deeply about your mission and they want to help, but they need to know how and why their support is crucial right now. To launch a successful individual giving campaign, consider these steps. First, develop a crisis-focused fundraising appeal. Clearly communicate the impact of a federal funding pause and the urgent need for support. Transparency is key. Explain what is happening or what could happen, what's at risk, and how donors can make a difference. Use compelling storytelling to illustrate how donations will directly help sustain programs and services. Share real-life stories from beneficiaries or staff members who are on the front lines of your work. Emphasize the immediate need and create a sense of urgency with a time-sensitive goal. For example, we need to raise $50,000 in the next 30 days to keep critical programs running. Next, utilize multi-channel outreach. An email campaign is a great place to start. Send a series of emails updating supporters on the situation and providing them with easy ways to donate. Keep emails concise, emotionally engaging, and action-oriented. Leverage social media fundraising tools such as Facebook and Instagram donation features to reach a broader audience. Create engaging posts, live videos, and donor spotlights to encourage participation. For donors who prefer traditional giving methods, consider sending a direct mail appeal. Personalized letters to high-level donors can be especially effective in securing larger gifts. Next, set a specific fundraising goal and deadline. Setting a clear financial target helps motivate donors. If they can see the progress, they are more likely to contribute. Use progress updates to keep donors engaged. Consider a fundraising thermometer on your website and regular social media updates to show how close you are to your goal. Offering incentives such as donor recognition, exclusive impact updates, or small thank you gifts can also encourage giving. Here's your next action item. Assign a team member to draft your fundraising appeal and create a multi-channel outreach plan by the end of next week. See how I had that timely, see all that times together? So number 2, seek private and corporate partnerships. Beyond individual donors, businesses can also play a crucial role in sustaining your organization during a funding pause. Many companies have corporate social responsibility programs, that's shortened to CSR sometimes, and are willing to support nonprofit initiatives that align with their values and their audience. So you should first start by identifying local businesses and corporate partners. Start by researching businesses that have previously supported causes like yours or have a history of philanthropy. Think about industries that align naturally with your mission. Local banks, healthcare organizations, law firms, and retail businesses are often eager to give back to their communities. Create sponsorship packets with defined benefits. Businesses need to see a return on their investment. So design tiered sponsorship levels that outline what they receive in return. So for example, a $5,000 sponsorship could include logo placement on your website and social media, while a $10,000 sponsorship might include events recognition or exclusive employee engagement opportunities. Lastly, make direct outreach through networking. Use LinkedIn to connect with corporate leaders and CSR managers. A warm introduction through a mutual connection can go a long way. Attend local Chamber of Commerce meetings and business networking events to make connections and introduce your nonprofit's mission. Personalize your outreach messages. Focus on shared values and the opportunity for the business to make a visible impact. All right, here's your next action item. Identify and initiate outreach to at least 5 potential corporate sponsors in the next 2 weeks. And now moving on to number 3, host fundraising events. Another effective way to diversify funding is through strategic fundraising events. Events not only raise funds, but also engage donors and spread awareness about your mission. Even if in-person events are limited, virtual and hybrid events often offer creative ways to connect with supporters. So you can plan a virtual or hybrid fundraising event. Virtual auctions, peer-to-peer fundraising campaigns, or live-streamed benefit concerts are great ways to engage donors. Partner with local influencers or community leaders to help promote the event and attract more participants. Create unique incentives such as behind-the-scenes nonprofit stories or private Q&A sessions with your leadership team. Your board members and major supporters can be powerful fundraisers if given the right tools. Encourage them to host small fundraising gatherings like Dinner with a Cause or Coffee and Conversations, where they invite their networks to learn more about your work. Provide a fundraising toolkit with email templates, social media graphics, and talking points to make it easier for them to ask for donations. Next, leverage corporate and community partnerships. Reach out to local businesses such as restaurants, fitness studios, or entertainment venues to set up give back nights where a percentage of sales goes to your nonprofit. Ask local businesses to donate items or services for a silent auction or a raffle to raise additional funds. And here's your action item for number 3. Assign a team member to lead a fundraising task force this month. The task force should develop a detailed individual giving campaign plan, identify corporate sponsorship opportunities, and plan a virtual or community-based fundraising event within the next 60 days. Diversifying your funding sources is not just a short-term strategy to survive a federal funding freeze. It's a long-term approach to strengthening your nonprofit's financial stability. By expanding your revenue streams, you reduce your reliance on any single funding source and build a more resilient organization. Now that we've discussed diversifying funding sources, let's shift our focus to another important area: state, local, private, and corporate grant opportunities. While federal funding pauses can create uncertainty, other funding sources can help bridge the gap. Many states, municipalities, and private foundations offer grants designed to support nonprofits, especially during financial challenges. The key is knowing where to look and how to strategically position your organization for success. In this section, we'll cover 3 critical steps: researching available grants that are not federally funded, connecting with government officials and grant administrators, and collaborating with other nonprofits to maximize opportunities. We're going to be on this slide for a few minutes, so let's get started. There's a lot of good information on this one. Step 1, research other grants. So being proactive in seeking out other grants is essential. Many nonprofits miss out on valuable funding simply because they aren't aware of available opportunities. Here's how you can find other grants and ensure your organization is in the loop. Use online grant databases. So a great starting point is grants.gov, which lists federally administered funds, but includes those that are distributed at a state level. Many states use this platform to manage their grant programs, so check regularly for new state opportunities. Private foundations are another strong funding source. Websites like Foundation Directory Online, GrantStation, GrantWatch, and Instrumental provide searchable databases of foundation grants, allowing you to identify private funders aligned with your mission. Additionally, many state nonprofit associations maintain lists of available grants, including emergency or discretionary funds that may not be widely advertised. So be sure to check their websites and reach out for guidance. Monitor government and private grant announcements. Another crucial step is staying updated on new grant announcements. I recommend assigning a team member to track updates from your state's Department of Community Affairs, economic development agencies, and local foundation websites. Signing up for newsletters from state and municipal agencies can provide timely information on upcoming grant cycles, eligibility requirements, and deadlines. Grant databases like Instrumental will also alert you of new grant opportunities based on your search criteria and your keywords. Finally, leverage Google Alerts by setting up keyword notifications like emergency nonprofit funding in your state or local community grants available. This ensures you receive real-time updates when new opportunities arise. By making grant research a consistent practice, you can stay ahead of the curve and identify funding that fits your nonprofit's needs. Step number 2, connect with local government officials. Let's talk about this often overlooked strategy, building relationships with local government officials. Many state and local agencies allocate discretionary funds to nonprofits, and staying connected with key decision makers can help you access these resources when funding is tight. Start by reaching out to city council members, county commissioners, and state representatives in your service area. Introduce your nonprofit's mission, share the impact of your story, and express the need for funding support. Request meetings specifically to discuss available grants, emergency funding options, or potential partnerships with government agencies. Many local leaders have insight into funding streams that aren't widely advertised. Next, attend town halls and networking events. Public meetings are another great way to stay informed about local funding priorities. Town halls, city council sessions, and nonprofit roundtables often include discussions on budget allocations and grant funding. Additionally, joining your local chamber of commerce, economic development board, or nonprofit coalitions can open doors to new opportunities. These nonprofit networks often, or these overall networks often provide direct connections to funders and policymakers. Next, seek guidance on grant application processes. Once you've identified a potential grant, don't hesitate to reach out to the grant administrator or the program officer for both government and private grants. Ask about eligibility requirements, scoring criteria, and common mistakes to avoid in applications. It's also beneficial to inquire about upcoming funding cycles and whether emergency funds are available. Many agencies appreciate proactive engagement from nonprofits, and establishing a connection can give your application a competitive edge. By fostering strong relationships with government officials and grant administrators, you position your nonprofit as a valuable community partner and gain access to funding that may not be publicly advertised. Then step number 3, collaborate with other nonprofits. Finally, one of the most effective ways to strengthen your funding applications is through collaboration. Funders often prioritize partnerships over standalone applications, so working with peer organizations can significantly improve your chances of receiving state and local grants. I recommend exploring joint grant applications. Many funders prefer to support collaborative initiatives that maximize impact. Consider partnering with nonprofits that complement your mission and services. So, for example, if your organization focuses on food security, partnering with a healthcare nonprofit to provide nutrition education could make your proposal more compelling to funders. Consider shared administrative or programmatic resources. Collaboration doesn't always mean co-applying for a grant. You can also work with other nonprofits to share administrative costs, program delivery, or fundraising efforts. For example, if several organizations in your area need grant writing support, pooling resources to hire a shared grant writer like Just Write Grants could be a cost-effective solution. Next, leverage nonprofit networks. Joining a statewide or regional nonprofit alliance can provide access to shared funding and advocacy efforts. These networks often work collectively to lobby for increased state and local funding for nonprofits. Additionally, advocacy campaigns are a powerful tool for urging state and local governments to prioritize funding for essential community services. By working together, nonprofits can amplify their voices and influence policy decisions that impact funding availability. Remember, collaboration not only strengthens your funding applications, but also fosters long-term sustainability by building a supportive nonprofit ecosystem. So before we wrap up this section, let's focus on our action steps. Here's your key takeaways for this section. Identify and apply for at least one non-federal grant by the end of this month. Assign a team member to track upcoming grant announcements. Schedule meetings with at least one local government contact to discuss potential funding opportunities. By taking these proactive steps, you'll be well on your way to securing additional funding and ensuring your nonprofit's sustainability during uncertain times. In the next section, we're going to dive into the importance of transparency. Before we do, though, if you have any questions, feel free to drop them in the chat. I see, Andrew, your question about foundation websites. Foundation Directory Online, Grant Station, Grant Watch, Instrumental. Those are some of the big ones. I have subscriptions to all of them. So if you're ever in a position and you're like, I would love to check out Instrumental, but I don't necessarily want to jump into a full subscription cost yet before I check it out, send me an email and I can set you up on a free trial for most of those. But let me know if there's any specifically that you're interested in seeing. Now that we've discussed securing other grants, let's shift our focus to another critical component of navigating a federal grant pause: transparent communication. During times of uncertainty, clear and proactive communication is essential to maintaining trust with your stakeholders. Whether it's your staff, volunteers, clients, board members, or funders, keeping everyone informed helps reduce anxiety and fosters a sense of stability. In this section, we'll discuss 3 key areas of stakeholder communication: updating staff and volunteers, informing clients and beneficiaries, and engaging your board of directors. By the end of this section, you'll have a concrete plan for ensuring transparency and strengthening trust within your organization. Let's start with internal communication. Your staff and volunteers are the backbone of your organization. If they hear about funding issues through rumors rather than directly from leadership, it can lead to confusion, frustration, and even panic. That's why it's essential to be upfront and transparent about what's happening and how it may impact them. One of the best ways to address concerns is to host a town hall meeting. Bring your team together to discuss the current funding challenges openly. Use this time to explain what's happening with federal grant funding, what actions the organization is taking to address the situation, how these changes could impact programs, roles, or workloads, and what the organization needs from staff and volunteers moving forward. Transparency is key here. Even if you don't have all the answers yet, sharing what you do know and what steps are being taken helps alleviate uncertainty. Encourage your team to ask questions and provide feedback. The more you involve them in problem solving, the more empowered and engaged they will feel. After the meeting, follow up with a written FAQ document that addresses the most common questions and concerns. This document should include how the funding pause affects or may affect your organization, expected timelines for resolution, any interim measures staff and volunteers need to be aware of, and whether or how their roles may change. Having this information in writing ensures consistency in messaging and provides a reference point for anyone who might need clarification later. By keeping your team involved and informed, you create a culture of trust and resilience, even during uncertain times. Now let's talk about external communication. Specifically, how to keep clients and beneficiaries informed if your organization's services are impacted by a funding pause. The last thing you want is for those who rely on your programs to be caught off guard by sudden changes. If a funding pause affects your ability to deliver services, develop a clear communication plan to notify your clients as soon as possible. Be upfront about any potential service disruption or delays, changes to program availability, and alternative solutions or temporary adjustments. Proactively setting expectations will help reduce frustration and allow your clients to plan accordingly. Consider multiple communication channels: email, phone calls, social media, your website, to ensure the message reaches everyone who needs to hear it. If your organization is unable to provide regular services due to a funding pause, do your best to offer alternative solutions. For example, can you temporarily modify or scale down your services to continue meeting needs in some capacity? Can you connect clients with partner organizations that provide similar services? Are there online resources or self-service options that could help bridge the gap? If you're referring clients to other organizations, make sure your communication is clear. Provide contact information, eligibility requirements, and any necessary instructions to ensure a smooth transition. The goal here is to demonstrate that even in the face of funding challenges, your organization remains committed to serving your community to the best of its ability. Effective client communication fosters trust, minimizes disruption, and reinforces your nonprofit's reliability even during difficult times. Finally, let's talk about the role of your board of directors in navigating a funding pause. Your board members are a valuable resource, not only for governance, but also for fundraising, advocacy, and strategic decision-making. First, assign board members to specific fundraising and advocacy roles. Your board can play a crucial role in securing emergency funding. Consider assigning specific tasks to individual board members based on their expertise and connections. For example, one member could lead outreach to major donors. Another could research emergency grant opportunities. Someone with advocacy experience could coordinate outreach to policymakers or government agencies. Clearly defining these roles ensures that board members actively contribute to finding solutions rather than just receiving updates about the situation. Next, leverage board connections for emergency funding. Your board members likely have extensive professional networks, whether in philanthropy, corporate partnerships, or government relations. Encourage them to leverage these connections to explore alternative funding sources. Could they introduce your nonprofit to a corporate sponsor? Do they know foundation leaders who might offer emergency funding? Are they aware of local businesses that might be willing to support your organization? Consider hosting a virtual fundraising event or donor roundtable with board members leading the discussion. This can be an effective way to rally support and generate immediate funding. By activating your board in a strategic way, you tap into additional resources and expertise that can help sustain your organization through challenging times. So before we move on, let's focus on your next key action step. I recommend you schedule a staff update meeting. It's crucial to keep your team informed in real time. Set up a meeting as soon as possible to provide clarity, answer questions, and align your staff on the next steps. The more unified and informed your team is, the better prepared your nonprofit will be to navigate any situation. The recent federal funding freeze situation has really been a wake-up call for many nonprofits that rely heavily on government grants. But what if your funding strategy didn't have to be at the mercy of federal budgets or political administrations? At Just Right Grants, while we can certainly help with federal and state grants, we specialize in helping nonprofits like yours diversify their revenue streams by tapping into that private and corporate funding we talked about a few minutes ago. While federal grants can be unpredictable, strong relationships with private foundations and corporate partners can provide sustainable long-term support for your mission. Our grant writing subscription services ensure that you're not just chasing the next government cycle. You're building a funding strategy that lasts. We help nonprofits identify new funding sources, craft compelling proposals, and establish relationships with funders who invest in your mission for years to come. I invite you to take control of your nonprofit's financial future today. Let's talk about how Just Right Grants can help your organization secure diverse, stable funding. Schedule a free intro call. The link is in the chat. And you'll learn how we've been helping nonprofits just like yours save time, spend less, and raise more with affordable grant writing subscriptions. And you can start building lasting partnerships now. As a special thank you for attending this webinar, if you mention it when you subscribe, you'll receive a discount equal to the cost of 1 month of your subscription. Don't miss this opportunity to start diversifying your funding with expert support at a reduced cost. I look forward to connecting with you. Now that we've discussed transparent communication with stakeholders, let's move on to another crucial strategy for navigating a federal grant pause: advocacy. Your organization is not alone in facing these challenges. Many nonprofits across the country are experiencing the same difficulties, and when we work together, we can push for meaningful change. By engaging in collective advocacy, you can amplify your voice, influence policy decisions, and ensure that your organization's needs, along with the needs of those you serve, are recognized. In this section, we'll cover 3 key ways to advocate for nonprofit support: engaging with nonprofit coalitions, sharing your story, and encouraging community engagement. Let's start by looking at how collaboration with nonprofit advocacy groups can strengthen your efforts. One of the most effective ways to advocate for your organization is by partnering with others who are facing the same challenges. Advocacy is more powerful when done collectively. And there are many nonprofit coalitions that are already working to influence federal funding policies. By joining forces with these groups, you can tap into their resources, expertise, and networks to make a stronger case for restoring funding. One way to accomplish this is to join advocacy groups addressing federal funding policies. Many national and regional nonprofit coalitions are actively engaged in lobbying efforts related to federal funding policies. These groups work directly with policymakers, government agencies, and legislators to push for changes that benefit nonprofits. By becoming a member of these coalitions, you can contribute to and benefit from their efforts. These groups often have dedicated advocacy teams that track policy developments, communicate with lawmakers, and coordinate messaging that aligns with your organization's needs. One of the key advantages of joining an advocacy coalition is access to data and insights that can help strengthen your case. These groups often conduct research and compile statistics that can demonstrate the broader impact of funding cuts on communities nationwide. To get started, research nonprofit advocacy groups in your sector or in your region. Some national examples include the National Council of Nonprofits, Independent Sector, and regional nonprofit associations. You can also participate in joint lobbying efforts or sign-on letters. Beyond joining advocacy groups, you can take a more active role in lobbying efforts. Many nonprofit coalitions organize joint letters to legislators advocating for specific funding policies, meetings with policymakers to present real-world impacts of funding pauses, and public awareness campaigns to rally support from the broader community. Signing on to a collective letter to Congress or participating in a coordinating lobbying visit can be much more effective than individual outreach. Lawmakers pay close attention when they see multiple organizations uniting around a single cause. Encourage your staff, volunteers, and supporters to get involved in these efforts. The more voices advocating for your cause, the more pressure is placed on decision makers to take action. Next, one of the most powerful advocacy tools at your disposal is storytelling. Numbers and statistics absolutely matter, but personal stories move people to action. Policymakers and the public need to hear firsthand how funding pauses affect real people and communities. One way is to write an op-ed for a local news outlet. A well-written op-ed in a local newspaper or an online publication can help raise awareness about your nonprofit's challenges and encourage public support. In your op-ed, consider including a clear explanation of the funding pause and how it affects your programs, personal stories of clients, staff, or volunteers impacted by a funding gap, and a call to action for your readers, whether that's contacting lawmakers, donating, or helping to spread the word. By publishing your story in a widely read news source, you increase visibility and you position your organization as a credible voice in the conversation about federal funding issues. In addition to written advocacy, video testimonials can be incredibly powerful. Seeing and hearing directly from those affected by a funding pause can create an emotional connection with lawmakers and the public. Consider recording short, compelling videos from your clients, your volunteers, or community members who rely on your organization's services. These can be shared on social media, featured on your website, or even sent directly to lawmakers. But keep the videos concise, 1 to 2 minutes long, and focus on personal impact. What has changed for this person since a funding pause? What resources are no longer available? What would reinstating the funding mean for them? Videos humanize the issue and make it harder for decision makers to ignore. Also, encourage community engagement. Advocacy is most effective when the community rallies behind a cause. The more people who speak up, the more likely lawmakers will take notice and act. So how can you mobilize your supporters to advocate for your nonprofit? One way is to provide supporters with templates for letters to legislators. Most people want to help, but they just don't know how. Make it easy for them by providing pre-written letter templates they can send to their elected officials. These templates should include a brief introduction explaining who they are and why they care, a description of the funding issue and how it affects their community, and a direct request for action, such as restoring funding or supporting a specific bill. Encourage supporters to personalize their letters to make them more impactful. A letter that tells a personal story about how a funding pause has affected their family, their job, or their community will stand out more than a generic form letter. You can distribute these templates via email, your website, and social media to reach as many people as possible. Another great way to engage the community is by organizing an advocacy-focused meeting. This can be an in-person event or a virtual town hall where supporters, clients, and volunteers come together to discuss the funding crisis and how they can take action. During the meeting, you can provide updates on the funding situation, share advocacy strategies and action steps, invite guest speakers such as local officials or nonprofit leaders to provide insights, and equip attendees with advocacy tools such as social media graphics, email templates, and talking points for conversations with legislators. This type of event helps build momentum and strengthens the collective advocacy movement. Before we wrap up this section, let's focus on our concrete action plan. So I'd suggest that you draft a public statement about any impact of the current funding situation and share it on social media. This statement should clearly explain the challenge that your organization is facing due to a funding pause or any that you anticipate if federal funding is not available for your nonprofit, the steps you are or would be taking to address it, and how supporters can get involved. Use this post to educate, inform, and inspire action. Be sure to include a call to action, whether that's asking followers to sign a petition, contact their legislators, or spread the word. Advocacy is about raising your voice, mobilizing supporters, and influencing change. By working together with other nonprofits, sharing impactful stories, and engaging your community, you can push for the policies and funding your organization needs to continue its vital work. Now, we have covered a lot of information today, and I know this is a topic that brings up many questions. So now is your time to ask what's on your mind, whether you need clarification on anything we've talked about today, or you need advice, or you just want to bounce around some ideas with all of your wonderful colleagues that are here with us today. I'm here to help. You know, one thing, the funding landscape right now is changing literally by the hour some days. So I will do my best to help with what I know. So feel free to drop your questions in the chat, in the Q&A, or into the chat. Catherine, I see your question about what if you're not a nonprofit. So Just Right Grants and this webinar is specifically designed for nonprofit organizations. But if you'll connect with me after the webinar, I have a colleague who is just expert level that can help with for-profit businesses, which is what I'm assuming that you're asking about. So feel free to send me an email and I'll make that connection for you. So I know sometimes that nobody wants to be the first person to ask a question in the Q&A. So I'm going to jumpstart it for you. One of the questions that we get a lot is, you know, how do you maintain strong relationships with funders when you're experiencing financial instability? And it's a great question. It really goes back to transparency. Transparency is key. Funders don't expect everything to be perfect all the time. And I think that's something that as nonprofit professionals, we have a misconception about, right? If they're giving us money, everything has to be perfect all the time or they're going to yank their funding, right? They're humans too. They know that it's not going to be perfect all the time, but they do want to see proactive communication from you and a clear plan. So being upfront about the challenges that you're facing now or in the future is important, but you also need to highlight the steps that you're going to take to stay sustainable. And we talked about that a lot today. Provide your donors with regular updates, not just a splash in the pan and then they don't hear from you for ages. You need to show them, why their continued support is vital right now, and ask for guidance, not just funding. I've been in the fundraising game for a long time now. And one of the first words of wisdom that I got from a mentor was ask for money, get advice, ask for advice, get money. So it's important to include your donors as a part of that strategic thinking about your organization, and then they'll continue to support you. So another question that we get, and I feel this in my core because I worked for lots of smaller teams, fundraising teams at nonprofits. If you rely heavily on federal grants, how can you start diversifying your funding stream without overwhelming a small fundraising team? It's a really important question because diversification is essential. And that's something that we can help you with at Just Right Grants, particularly if you're a small team. That's part of my mission as managing director, is to help nonprofits that are in that situation. But the key, if you're going to do it on your own, is to start small and to build gradually. So you want to focus first on low lift strategies. So for example, if you don't have a donor program in place, now's a great time. Start by launching a simple monthly giving campaign. Next, move into leveraging those corporate sponsorships we talked about. Even small local businesses that just maybe take a little drop-in visit might be willing to sponsor a program or an event. Consider earned income strategies. Like, does your nonprofit offer a certain level of expertise that you could provide a paid workshop or a training for the community? And then look at smaller state and local grants. Federal grants are often very complicated and very timely, or they require a lot of time. So if you the smaller state and local grants are typically simpler applications with a quicker turnaround time. And make sure you're engaging your board, right? Put them to work. Have them be helping you do all those things that we talked about earlier with outreach, organizing a fundraiser, and tapping into professional networks. And diversification doesn't mean you have to do everything at once, right? You don't have to start, tomorrow when you get into the office and be like, okay, here's 15 things we have to do by the end of the week. Right? It's about layering in new funding sources over time so that you become less dependent on any single revenue stream. So I'm going to jump back over here to the Q&A as I see a few. Rebecca, yes, we will have a recording of this session. Will be sent out via email tomorrow. If you don't get it, send me an email and I can send you the link for it. But everybody that registers should get an email for it. Matt says, do you have any suggestions for building partnerships seeking funding when you're in a geographic area that lacks infrastructure support for your mission? That feels like a very complicated question, Matt. It feels like an onion, like there's a lot of layers there. I would imagine if that were the case at a nonprofit that I was working at, I would imagine that probably like local and municipal grants would not be an avenue for you to explore. And I would potentially look at private funders, private foundations that are in your region, or if there's a local funder. I think there's more questions there I would need to ask you to be able to answer that effectively. Why does your mission lack support? I think that would be the ultimate question. And if it's a political issue or a personal issue that you could work around by finding funding sources that aren't connected to that politician or that person. So private foundations, I'm a huge fan of private foundations because you can find them locally, regionally, and nationally. And they can really, you might look at it and think, well, that's not as much as what I can get from a federal grant. In a lot of cases, that's true. But a federal grant can really, sometimes be a one and done. And then you're constantly in hunting and gathering mode. And a private foundation, if you manage that relationship correctly and you steward them and, and cultivate it, can can really be a long-term funding partner that, grant writing gold is you get to the point where you just send them a letter every year and you still get the money. So, there's a lot of value in that. And I think that's why it's so important for nonprofits to diversify, to move away from solely relying on federal grants if, the climate right now didn't reinforce that already. But just to think about those other options, because that funding can be just as impactful over time, and it doesn't require as much work in most cases. So I don't know, Matt, that I answered your question, but if you would like to share more specific details about that with me, I'd be glad to talk through it with you over email, or we can set up a time to chat. Going to hop back over here to the chat because it looks like there's something new here. I am happy to drop links to the sites in the chat in just a moment. I think you're asking about the links to the grant research databases. Those are, again, Foundation Directory Online, grantwatch.com. Foundation Directory Online should be that as well too. FoundationDirectoryOnline.com, grantwatch.com, grantstation.com, and then Instrumental, which is spelled as you would typically spell it, only it's missing the last A. So instrumental.com. Great. Well, I appreciate your time today so very much. I've got one more thing to share with you. I just want to quickly summarize because I know it was a lot. So just go over what we talked about today so you can utilize the key takeaways that'll help your organization navigate the challenges of a federal grant pause now or later and build a more resilient financial future. First, we're going to assess your financial position and prioritize essential programs. Next, we're going to strengthen relationships with current funders and seek bridge funding. Next, we're going to diversify revenue sources to reduce reliance on federal grants. We're going to explore other grant opportunities, including state, local, private, and corporate funders. We're going to communicate transparently with stakeholders. And lastly, we're going to advocate for nonprofit support through collective action. Understanding these key takeaways is important, but taking action is what will move your organization forward. To help you get started, here's a little reminder of the concrete steps that you're going to work on next week and throughout this month. You're going to complete your financial assessment worksheet. You should still be able to download it here, that free template to help you get started. You're going to draft and send an update to your donors. You're going to apply for at least one other grant by the end of the month. You're going to schedule a staff update meeting, and you're going to share a public statement on social media. I encourage you to follow us on social media. We're at Just Right Grants on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube. That's where we'll announce future webinars and other resources to help you in your role at your nonprofit. Also, be sure to sign up for our e-newsletter. There's the link. Every month, we send updates on webinars just like this, live streams, new and exciting grant opportunities, nonprofit news, and fun things like our nonprofit book club and our grant writers' favorite things lists on Amazon. As we conclude today's session, I want to emphasize one key point. You are not alone. Nonprofits across the country are facing similar funding challenges, but with strategic planning, strong partnership, and proactive advocacy, your organization can navigate this moment successfully. By assessing your financial health, strengthening funder relationships, diversifying revenue streams, exploring other grants, communicating openly, and advocating for change, you'll be well positioned to sustain your work and continue making an impact. Remember, small, consistent actions add up to big results. If you implement even just a few of the strategies we've discussed today, you'll be taking meaningful steps towards financial stability and long-term success. Before we go, I'd love to hear from you one more time. What is the one action step that you are committing to take this week? Drop your answer in the chat. I'm interested to see what resonated most with you. And while you're doing that, that's my contact information there. I'm always accessible. If you've been on any other webinars with me, you know that I love talking shop. My husband and my family and my friends make fun of me. The fundraising part of my brain is never turned off. So I would love to connect with you. Thanks, Catherine. I'm excited that you're going to be analyzing your financials. I think that's really the first place to start. Honest financial assessment. Honest being the key word. Thank you, Andrew. Yes, that's hard to do sometimes, isn't it? I mean, to really sit down and dig into it without any wishful thinking. Great. Thank you, Rebecca. I think it's really important, that letter to the stakeholders, because I think a lot of times, or right now, I think just talking to some of my colleagues and people in my family who, whenever they hear anything to do with nonprofit news or fundraising news, they kind of look to me, because if you're outside of this world that we live in, it's it can feel like a different language, right? And we're probably so ingrained in it that it feels second nature to us. But to people that aren't in fundraising and aren't in nonprofits, they may hear some of it and just really not understand it. Your stakeholders, particularly donors, might be in a similar position. They might be, making that $100 a year donation or $1,000 a year donation or whatever it is to your organization, and watch the news and just have no concept of how that's going to impact your organization specifically. So I think really communicating that very openly and honestly to your stakeholders is really, really critical. So thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for participating in the chat and the Q&A. If you have any follow-up questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Again, we'll be sending a recording of this webinar along with the slides through your email tomorrow. If you don't receive it, please let me know. And I truly and honestly wish you success in your funding journey. I know how challenging it is, but it's so worth it, and it's so important for the mission and the programs and the people that you serve in your community. I very much look forward to seeing you in our next webinar, and I hope that you continue to keep in touch with me and have a wonderful day. Thank you.